Welcome to the Joanne Avison podcast. I'm really delighted to be releasing this interview with Karen Kirkness, who I had the pleasure of interviewing 3 years ago when we worked together on her brilliant book, Spiralbound. This interview was actually done shortly after that book was completed, and since then, this amazing woman has acquired a PhD in anatomy pedagogy, meaning she's one of the people contributing to the future of medicine by training young medical students in embryology, in human shape, and in how that makes a difference to how we move. Karen is one of those people I'm very privileged to call my friend. I admire her hugely. We nickname her the chirality queen, and she's one of the people who's contributing to 21st century anatomy and why it matters so much to understand that the fundamental blueprint of the human form is spiral, chiral, recoil. I'm super grateful. Karen has contributed to my new book, Myofascial Magic in Action, by writing one of the sections, recoil, in the chapter on the 5 R's. But that's to come in the future. First, listen to how excited she was when Spiralbound first came out. Welcome to this episode of Pain Removed, Performance Improved. And I am absolutely delighted to have my very dear friend, my colleague, I can't tell you, Karen is something of a muse in my life because she is so amusing and she cracks me up when things get really, really tricky and when the anatomy gets too intense. Karen is one of those lovely people that you can sit down and talk to and work out how we make sense of something and then how we make it work in our lives, whether we're practitioners, therapists, movement manual practitioners, or people with an absolute fascination for how the body works. Karen Kirkness, I love you. Talk to me. How are you?
Well, the feeling is clearly mutual. It's going to be a mutual appreciation society, I think, here. Joanne, you are on both sides of the paradigm with your skill and experience as a therapist and your experience in training, insight, and your love for movement. So you're both a therapist and a movement goddess. So you have feet in both of those camps. Whereas my training is through movement and, anatomy academically. So having, those strings to your bow, I've really watched and learned through reading your book, Yoga, Fascia, Anatomy and Movement.
Karen, let me just hook this because I just want to be clear with people. Karen is a clinical anatomist, and there's a huge difference between Karen being a clinical anatomist and me being a dissector who has had the great privilege of working in different forms of dissection, working with Karen, working with our beloved colleague, John Sharkey. And from clinical anatomy, there is a very profound academic background. You don't get to decide that you want to explore the fascia. In clinical anatomy, you have to learn every single thing in the human body. And you have to learn every system by default, because otherwise you can't make sense of the anatomy. So the scope of your academic knowledge is way, way, way beyond mine. What I love, however, is that you have brought that into anatomy art. You paint bodies so that people can really get this sense of seeing what we get the privilege of seeing in the laboratory. I just consider my access to it to be a privilege over these last 20 years. It's just incredible. And you're one of the people that took the time to dedicatedly study everything and then seek to present it to people so that movement and manual therapists can understand it visually. And you use body paint to actually show where muscular integration and forms are under the skin. Can you talk to us about how that helps people learn yoga, for example, or any movement?
Well, I would love to talk about that, Joe. As you know, it's a passion project for me. And when I came to my master's work in human anatomy at Edinburgh University Biomedical Sciences, I was 35 when I joined that course, or 34 maybe. Anyway, I was, it over the hill for sure when it comes to people who are coming to the study of anatomy for medical training. I was in and amongst people in their 20s. So I was old coming to the study of the body in that way compared, my cohort were all youngsters, and I I really, really struggled because there's a hidden curriculum, and there's a body of work around the hidden curriculum in the literature in medical education. The hidden curriculum is like the shadow curriculum, the one that's embedded and implied, but not explicitly stated. Nonetheless, it's as important, if not more so, than the explicitly stated curriculum. So it's everything that everyone already knows when they come into the medical education establishment as a student. You get all of that through medical school, but I had none of that. I was coming to this study as a movement professional, as a self-employed person. I certainly didn't have a medical background. I had a background in art. So my hidden curriculum was a completely different ball of wax, shall we say. So I understood things differently. My approach to understanding anything is always rooted in experience. I have to take things apart, put them back together, take them apart again, build and rebuild, and feel it, get right inside it, make models of it, draw, talk about it. There didactic learning just doesn't work for me. And what I've learned over the years is that it actually very rarely works for anyone. It works for a small number of people who have a history of it, who have a lot of practice in that method. But even these people who are raised up and grow up in the didactic um, pedagogy, that everyone, if you're a human, you're going to benefit from kinesthetic learning. And the body painting came to me through my master's degree. We had the opportunity to work with the amazing Professor Gabrielle Finn. She contributed to our master's course and brought the body painting technique to us. And she has developed that through her research and has published extensively on the applications of body painting in medical education. And so from her, we learned this technique. And I can remember the day she came to contribute. It was medically focused anatomy. Body painting is different. You're looking at things like the dermatomes and the brachial plexus and some of the superficial musculoskeletal anatomy as well. But we broke down into small groups and got to the body painting. The medical students were really, no one was taking their shirt off. Let's put it that way. People are like maybe rolling up a sleeve or exposing the triangle of the neck. But people are reticent to get tops off, if you know, as they say in Scotland, tops off. But I knew in my profession in yoga, we would be able to have more access to shoulders and upper back. And I could immediately visualize, I could see how much fun this was going to be to move that approach into the movement world, and how people are more likely to get stuck into that and be more comfortable with body painting and having more access to the actual body than you might do in your average group of medical students.
Well, I hear you, and I hear your the pain you went through to break through into the empowering performance of people, because I know I've seen on your website, KarenKirkness.com, there's gorgeous pictures, and I've had feedback from people who've been in your class where you actually go one step further, which is one of the reasons I love you so much. You're such a brilliant teacher, is that you have that skill of empowering others to do what you do and get the results of the alchemy that you had to perform. You had a choice. You could have sat there thinking, "Oh my God, everybody's younger than me. I'm washed out here. This is over my head. I don't know what the hidden curriculum is, but it's definitely excluding me," because it's usually very exclusive to the group that have it. It's their language, and you're not in their clan. So you know what? You're outside. And you didn't take any of that personally. You dedicated yourself to the results. And then you create classes where I've seen movies I cannot wait to do this in person with you. It's just,
Oh, we'll have so much fun.
we'll have so much fun. But, in a yoga class, we're all traditionally in a little tiny, tiny top and short shorts, and you get everybody painting everybody else. And so the animation of the kinesthetic experience of how you perform a class, how you feel the anatomy, and then you, of course, speak it fluently because it's part of you and you've seen it. I know that makes such a difference to you that you're even doing your PhD in anatomy pedagogy, i.e. teaching methods of anatomy. So talk to me a little bit about how important it is to you to feel and experience the anatomy.
Well, as you know, Joe, in your own world, that building models and being the model of force vectors and of all the theory that we explore in an abstract way, that it really boils down to nothing unless you can actually experience it and put it into practice and embody that theory. So making and developing methods for bringing that theory and making it accessible for people, for everyone, for me, is the most exciting aspect to it, is to actually make it livable and make it so that we can feel it and access it through our actions, through being and doing.
And have you found it's improved your performance as a teacher?
Oh, without a doubt. No, it's next level and next level again, and levels I didn't know existed through not only working it out myself, different models. I'm sitting here with my slinky, it's like a fidget
Yeah.
spinner.
Yeah.
Where you fold the slinky in on itself and it makes a torus that you can just continuously roll through itself. These little accessible techniques, body painting is another one. It allows you to feel that you have a right to it. And I think it goes back to that.
Yes.
You use this word privilege, and that's a really important word nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that to have access to anatomical material, to cadaveric material, to the theory of anatomy and physiology, it's a privileged place. And people who don't go through academic training will often feel, even though they're deeply curious, very experienced and informed about the body, they're always, what we will always feel a sense of maybe the imposter, the sense like, I don't have access, I don't have uh, qualification, therefore I can't own this. I can't make it my own. I can't teach it with the level of credibility and depth. Um, but that is a tragic, self-fulfilling prophecy, because you just make your own lack of access, which is reinforced by that privilege thing. We haven't had the privilege to access academic anatomy, so we don't really we don't live in our power to own it, if that makes sense.
It
When
does.
you
It's a very careful
Mm,
path.
mm,
I think it's a very careful path because there are also, in America, for example, there are completely different rules about anatomical study, and you can have access to cadaveric specimens if you have the right hygiene in place. You don't need to be a clinical anatomist, where people like yourself and John Sharkey are clinical anatomists. You're in a different league of understanding. And I think that somebody like me, who is a very dedicated dissector, and there are plenty of us around the world, we have to make that distinction and allow for the fact that we don't know what we don't know, and we know what we don't know, in the sense that, I know an awful lot about fascia, an awful lot more than an awful lot of people.
I'll say.
And I have friends in the medical field who say, they ask me about, and I'm like, hang on a second, you're the one with the medical, no, you don't understand. We didn't do very much dissection, and you've done 1,000 times more dissection than I have. That's very interesting, and that's my experience, but it's not couched in what I call the hallowed halls of anatomy training and academic knowledge, because I have huge respect for what I don't know. We don't know what we don't know. So I get as nervous about what I call bumper sticker anatomy, based on people using access, which is a privilege, as if it substitutes education. It doesn't. It does not. it augments education. So I use it to augment my education as a movement practitioner and a manual therapist and other things. I studied languages. It augments my study of languages because I can understand the body's language more succinctly. But I bow to you for the sheer energy, because you've got a master's degree in anatomy art as well. So your dedication to knowing what's behind everything, as well as your power to translate it into performance, is such a resource to everybody working with helping people move better and helping people feel better. Less pain, you feel better, you move better. And so you are also a very dedicated Ashtangi. I mean, you do everything properly. You've got the archetype of the engineer written all over you, don't you?
Well, I used to, but now after second baby, things are a bit different. But it was just to go back to this point, because I think we were harmonizing with, on the same melody. Your point that the education and the degree, the qualification, of course, it's important. Otherwise, I wouldn't have stayed up all night for the couple of years to kind of. Then
exactly.
The master's degree in anatomy was a year, and I was out of my depth, and I studied all the time. And not everybody does that. I stuck in. I got the degree. Yes, that matters. Doctors stick in for a decade or more of study, and then they have to continue to maintain their qualification in practice. And yes, of course, that matters. But what matters, just as much, I think, is to recognize that education doesn't always have to be targeted toward the qualification.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. Yeah. And that education for the lifelong learner. And to be honest, I probably would have killed myself to learn all of that, whether or not I got the degree. Was really, we learn because we're fascinated almost to a pathological level of wanting to know about how the body works, wanting that next level of understanding, not for the degree. In this decade of my life, as I come into my 40s and beyond, I'm going to continue absolutely smashing it, not for any degrees or qualifications, but because I can't stop myself. It's ridiculous. And I know you're the same. It is because of our passion for the body as a self-healing instrument, and how our movement can be therapeutic, and how we can usher in the next generation of people who are undertaking this work because of our interest in healing. And so I just wanted to kind of sing that with you.
I'm with you, and I want to say what a privilege it was to work with you on Spiralbound, your newly published book that took how long? 8 years? 6 years? You were writing it since you were born. I mean, let's face it. But the process, I had such a privilege. It is a privilege, Karen. I mean, your dedication is awe-inspiring.
Oh.
And here's what I think about qualifications. I have an absolute thing about them. I think what they do is they tick a box and say, yes, you have that learning power. It's not about fame and fortune in 5 minutes because you announce this, a given project or whatever. What that degree says is I stuck it out. I did what you did. I'm not saying I did. I mean, I did. I have a master's degree, and yes, of course, I worked 40, 50 hours a month on top of the 4 weeks of the month that I was working full time. That's what it takes. But for me, that degree is an acclamation, a claiming of that level of dedication. And you have 2 of them. And you've also got such an extensive practice originally in Ashtanga. I know you've expanded beyond that now because your focus is so much on self-awareness and developing the subtle practices of yoga, which obviously is where I've been living for the last God knows how many years. And what I found in the book that was just so exciting was the way you came to translating your ability to create models and use the human body as the model. It's not an easy thing to do, Karen, and you achieved that with the book. So Talk to me a little bit about it, because it was just wonderful to work with you.
Well, thank you, Joe. It was the process started with reading your book, and I think so many of us, anyone listening to this podcast, will have read your book. If you haven't, if you're listening to this, you must absolutely read Joe's book, YFAM. It set us all up for the new paradigm, for that paradigm to shift. And then concurrently, as I was reading it, John Sharkey, he was having his Biotensegrity dissection at Dundee, the soft fix cadaveric specimen dissection. And that whole year was a year leading up to that, where I was asking questions about structure and healing, and how the depth of my practice that I had experienced to that point, deep postural yoga, when I approached it through rotation, I felt that even the deep so-called extreme movement felt to me like therapy.
Mm,
But when I
absolutely.
approached it, yeah, when I wasn't mindful of the rotation, and I didn't resonate with rotation, then I was hurting myself. And I could see it everywhere when I was adjusting students, when I adjusted them by by using compression and rotation to allow the joints to find their own space. If I didn't adjust with that every single time, then I never did. I never adjusted without that, because I knew that's how you hurt
Yeah.
someone.
Mm.
Yeah. And it was coming to appreciate that sense, the embodiment of it beyond words. I knew I had the feeling for it. I knew that it was true because I had felt it coming through. And then when I was reading your book, when I was reading Graham Scar's book, and looking at the work of Gambarto and the fibrillar structure, we don't learn about the dermis in anatomy. We just cut it off, and you don't learn about the
Exactly.
connectivity
Yeah.
in anatomy. It goes straight in the bin. And that was the missing link, that fibrillar structure, the flux, the constant movement of tissue, to harness that and to see where that could go. That was really the basis of the book. And then when we got our process going, it was trying to write in a way that was not like a master's degree reporting of facts,
Yeah.
very dry,
Yeah.
because and that's what it was. It was me parsing through the science that underlies what I was experiencing. I really wanted to get specific and make a contribution that could be considered academic or semi-academic, that leaves a trail of breadcrumbs so that anyone who's curious and coming to this work could see where I was drawing from. And then you helped me through our relationship when we first met. Do you remember? It was at Dundee.
Dundee, you were very pregnant.
Yes, I was. I was pregnant, and just knew when I'd met you that you were going to help me shape up this work so that it could be something that contributed to the movement field, as well as to something that could be academic, that we together were going to find that, to calibrate the language to get it right. And it's been nothing but a wild ride ever since.
Well, the thing is that you have several skills. You have multi-skill. Is there such a thing as multi-skillular?
Yeah.
Karen, you embody it. But the thing is, your writing is so succinct and so disciplined and so in depth that what you actually bring to the table is this fabulous ability to reference everything. But then I was reading your blogs, and some of the blogs are just so colloquial and warm and fun, and so a different vernacular to the scientific.
I'm a cheese ball. Really, that's,
What's a
my
cheese
ham.
ball?
Cheese ball is like a clown.
Well, anyhow, it was like, how can we get these two elements together so it reads like a blog, but it punches like a scientifically researched. And I mean, I had another great privilege was working with Tom Myers for years, when he very, 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 very first. I mean, I proofread the first edition of Anatomy Trains. In fact, I cut my anatomy teeth on Anatomy Trains, and I absolutely know every minuscule dot of the anatomy trains as a metaphor. Tom Myers is the first person to say it, the metaphor. Obviously, there's no trains in the human body. But what I always argued with Tom about and struggled with from my experience of cadaveric dissection and from my experience as a movement teacher primarily, and through my studies of consciousness, was that we argued about the spiral line. And Tom is great. Tom lets you argue with him. I mean, he sets fire to your tail feathers, but it's like, that's the deal. That's how we rolled. And it was a fabulous training for me in raising my game to ask the next set of questions. And I actually think the work you've done in Spiralbound of the 5 filaments is a match for anatomy trains. I think it takes us beyond. And that's not to diminish anatomy trains. Anatomy trains, as I've said many millions of times, Tom Myers cleared a clearing in a forest for all of us to stand and speculate in. And he made this tremendous contribution to the work of the practitioner understanding anatomy from a semi-academic point of view. Let's use that, like the professional knowledge they needed to back them up and move forward. And he cleared that clearing in the forest with a size. He's a force to be reckoned with. And I know, I've worked with him for years, and it is just stunning work that we all have to lean on. However, it doesn't come from the experience. There's one thing Tom used to say, I wish I could be a woman. I wish I could give birth. He used to say it in class regularly. It was a throwaway line. I can never have that experience this lifetime of, I'm paraphrasing, of what women have to go through. It's, I watch, I observe, I learn, I find out, but I can't have that experience. And I remember one day when he said it, and I just said, why do you want to be able to do that? And he said, because then I could experience what I'm describing. And that was a clue. And I think your manuscript changed as much over the birth of your 2 little ones as it did taking the pathway from dissertation style to accessible style. And I think the keystone of that is the spirals. And what I've come to realize is that there are no lines in the human body. Doesn't matter how much we love it. And what we've inherited is linear. And Tom has provided us with a real clearing in the forest with those linear continuities. He's brought continuity into the concept. And I think we're ready now to upgrade from continuity, which is a linear metaphor to get us to the continuity. But now you've brought in the spiral metaphor to get us to experience. And brava.
Wow.
5 filaments.
Big, it's karmically loaded, isn't it? It's karmically pregnant. It's huge to, taking that one with, the anatomy trains. Wow. That taking on that model. I remember I was in Goa. I went to India before I was pregnant and was practicing with Lino Miele, the great Ashtanga legend, and then also with David Garrigues, another legend. And these guys, strong practice, really dynamic, and all of it so deeply physical. Yeah, with the physicality of the practice is just it being in the fire, not just next to it. You just melting.
You burn. Yeah.
Burn, but wonderful. I loved it. But I had the Anatomy Trains book with me, and every page was just, it's a jaw dropper. If you're listening to this and you haven't read the Anatomy Trains, and a lot of yogis haven't, because why would you? It looks quite dry. It looks like another, anatomy book that quite often yogis, we want a more of a spiritual, more of a subtle approach. And some of the anatomy stuff can seem almost too far gone down the nuts and bolts aisle. But we, Joe and I would both really assure you that the continuities of, we're starting to move from continuities to the continuum. And within that continuum, the volume of that continuum is animated by thrupled motion, which is another one we made up, didn't we, in the course of writing Spiralbound. Well, no, you really filled out my understanding, and I just maybe coined that quip, but it was you that really brought me through to a deep understanding of coupled motion, and that through for example, in the scapulohumeral rhythm, when the humerus starts to elevate past that 30 degrees, then it picks up the spirality of the scapula, and the scapula then moves, and so does the clavicle. All of it is rotating together, and as
Mm.
the rotations take place, they are describing a volume. And so we
Yeah.
are at all times spiral vectors,
Volume.
and these trajectories they're infinite, virtually infinite within the continuum. And that when it's at rest, we have this equilibrium state that it's almost, it's mythical. While we're alive, we're never really still. There are moments where we do feel stillness, but living beings, we're embodying this volume that is constantly infolding upon itself and through itself. And our discussions over the years that it took for us to parse these concepts and get them into a language that is truly authentically us, and it was me generating that manuscript was really almost transcribing our conversations, which is why your name is on the cover, Joe. Really that manuscript, you're the spiritual midwife of it.
Oh, I
Psychic.
love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
being a spiritual midwife.
Yeah.
But to go back to the spirals, what I
Mm.
think you've managed to do is capture the essence of the next step. And I think anyone reading Anatomy Trains, read it, enjoy it, learn it. It's so useful. It takes you from bits to bands. But we're now going from bands to bodies. And as you said so beautifully, we're going from the continuity to the continuum. And I'm sorry to say this, but I think it took somebody who was a volume containing a volume called a baby and giving birth to a volume to seek out the experience of volumetric on the matness, whatever we call that.
Mm.
And whether we are yogis, Pilates teachers, movement teachers, or just people going for a walk with the dog, for goodness sake, once you understand the scapulohumeral rhythm of the shoulder and arm, or the pelvofemoral rhythm of the hip and leg, when you understand those, what you've managed to do with your book, and I'm still awestruck. Every time I pick it up, I go, oh my God, look what the drawings and the images and the explanations and then the references coming out of you. I mean, it is a phenomenon. The book is a phenomenon, but it's also a very fast reference for how we translate that on the mat, whether we are practitioners or just eager people looking to make sense of our practice. And I think it matters. And I think what you've done is served everybody with a resource that is bright and accessible. You've pulled in tensegrity, which after all, in the living body, is the inclusion of Ida and Pingala, tension and compression. So we've shifted from the classical biomechanics that you have learned so thoroughly and that classical anatomy into the contemporary anatomy that is including Ida and Pingala. And then when they conjoin, we have the spontaneous arising of Sushumna. And that is such an exquisite metaphor and so much older than us and so much a part of the ancient spiritual aspect that I'm so steeped in, that it starts to make sense, not just of the continuity of the body parts with each other, but of the human consciousness growing through experience through movement, because movement says we're alive, right? So you've managed to harness all of that. And I know we're already talking, we're not going to say what the title is, but we're already talking about our next book. And I'm stupidly excited about it. But for now, this one is out. And I just want people to buy it, love it, dip in and out of it, and have opportunities to work with you and this rich resource that you give from your experience of parenting, because I think that changed how you presented the book. You made it very real.
Just to kind of highlight that point, I've recently done this course with Janet Velasquez. She's this icon in active birth, because through our study of the motion, the biomotion of the body, coupled motion, and the spirality, what I've called the 5 filaments, and what we're working to develop together as the 5 filaments. We've got hand and shoulder, foot and hip, and then the axial matrix, making the 5. But in the pelvis, the pelvic kinematics are intrinsically related to birth. And my first birth, some of you might know, was an unplanned C-section. And I fully was planned to have an active home birth with my first with Owen, and was really, really sad that I didn't get to have that experience. When we come to accept whatever birth happens, we are, reminded of our privilege and being lucky enough to have the medical care I did have. So, I learned a lot from that birth. But it made me even more curious about the experience of an active birth and what the female pelvis goes through in pregnancy under the influence of relaxin, and how the pelvic kinematics are so much more mobile during pregnancy and then the birthing process. And I was fortunate enough to have a so-called natural birth. I had a home birth with Farron, our second baby, and was honored and so just so grateful to have that experience, to actually feel the movement of the baby through the pelvic canal and actually feel the hip filaments at work, the opening spiral to receive the engagement of Fern's head in my pelvis, and then to feel the grounding spiral as she moved her way out of my body. The physical experience of pregnancy and birth, it tuned me into the practicality of the spirals of the 5 filaments, that I wasn't just making something up. However, we were codifying. There was a kind of a simplification coming to understand and recognize how spirality makes its way into and through our tissues. And having that experience of pregnancy and birth, it was huge.
Drop the mic. I mean, what do I say except that I'm very excited to complete this call with this podcast, this episode, I love talking to you anyway. I don't need to be online to do that. Our lovely chat. Of the 5 filaments, the axial matrix, obviously referring hugely to the spine, is something that if anybody wants to have a really valuable taste of Karen's work, they can do that with the Fascia Hub. And you can go to thefasciahub.com for more details about that. And also, if you go to karenkirkness.com, you will be able to join in and learn. There's a taster course on the 5 filaments, and then there's the much more dedicated approach to learning the whole shtick, if that's something that you want to do. And I personally can't recommend it highly enough. I can't even tell you. I mean, so thank you for everything. Do get a taste of Karen at the Fascia Hub. And last but not least, her book, Spiralbound, is available from handspringpublishing.com. And this is also a shout out to Handspring Publishing, who have been so dedicated to both of us. So I think we both took years longer than we promised to hand in our manuscripts respectively. And so, Karen, just so that you have the last word, pain removed, performance improved. How is that expressed for you in the spiral motif, as we call it, the queen of chirality?
Well, if it's possible to move in harmony with the tissues, then we can make our movement a kind of therapy. And when we feel good in our bodies, performance is a given. The improvement of performance will be a symptom of feeling good in our bodies.
I love that. How about improved performance as a symptom? Wow. Thank you, my darling, as always.
It is my pleasure. Thanks so much, Joe. And thanks to everyone who's been listening today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.
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 I really hope you loved listening to that interview as much as I enjoyed doing it. We both are very dear friends. We seek to make a difference in the world and to support each other doing it. And I really hope that you'll check out Karen's book, Karen's courses, and now, under the name of Dr. Karen Kirkness, have the opportunity to work with her. It really is a joy.